Joining us now, University of Michigan professor of economics and public policy, Justin Wolfers. Faz and Ashley are still with us. Justin, you're new to the bunch. Talk to me about the decision, if he follows through with it, as the reporting suggested he was flirting with last night, to fire Jerome Powell.
Like, what a fabulous day we've already had today, Katie. We between 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock, we plummeted into a recession, and then we came back out of it by noon. There's a bit of overstatement there, but let me explain. The Wall Street Journal had the story that Trump was planning to fire Jay Powell, the Fed chair. Were he to do that, it would be a major blow to the independence of the organisation and, in fact, people's trust in the US financial system. So stocks tanked. An hour later, seeing that, Trump walked out in front of the press and said, "Just kidding, I have no intention of firing Jay Powell." The extent to which things moved is quite extraordinary, because you have to realise this was simply the rumour that he would do something that perhaps markets had already priced in some possibility. And it was only talking about replacing one of the 12 members of the Federal Open Market Committee. So if stocks can move that quickly and that much, they lost about $250 billion this morning before putting it back on a couple of minutes later. It does sort of tell you just how important markets think the Fed's independence is for the US economy, and just what a tragic mistake it would be were we to tear it up because of one old man's grudge against a very fine public servant.
That's one way to put it. Ashley, does he actually think that he can get away with firing Jerome Powell?
Well, you know, what Trump likes to do is, first of all, it's clearly something he's interested in. He has said as much, even before drafting this letter and sharing it with House Republicans and getting their opinion that maybe it would be a good idea. And this is often what Trump does. He floats something publicly, he floats it privately, he sends up these trial balloons, and then he waits to see the reaction before making a decision. In this case, maybe the markets was a sufficient reaction that Red, you just had up on the screen to pause this idea. But I don't think we can say that this idea is out of sight, out of mind. It's something he's talked about. It's something he wants to do. It's something he's considering doing. And it's something that he may yet do. We just don't know.
His polling on the economy, Faz, is not good. I mean, you could say that he got elected based on the economy. People had a bad vibe on it, even though the numbers didn't quite match up. They didn't feel it was good. There was immigration stuff. But the numbers on the economy for Donald Trump, supposed to be one of his strong suits, not great at all. 60% of Americans disapprove of it. Are the Democrats doing enough to, in your opinion, seize the moment?
Not yet, but we got some time, and hopefully we'll continue to build our case. To your point, I think you raised this earlier in the show, and I agree with it, which is when Donald Trump finds himself in these kinds of problems that he's now dealing with, Epstein, in related issues, he moves to a distraction. And I tend to think and to see the Powell move as one to say, hey, go look at this shiny object. He raised it in a House Republican meeting, hoping that it could stir some discourse that, distracts us from economic conversations and other conversations that he doesn't want to be having. I mean, you remember this when he and Musk were at war, and then suddenly that weekend we have in LA major ICE protests going on, that same weekend. So I tend to see this as really an effort at distraction. To your point of building a Democratic voice on this, it gives us the opportunity to express, hey, here's how you can build credibility with people who are feeling like, who's Donald Trump working for? The rich and the powerful. This crystallizes that.
What's interesting is that the numbers on the economy, the hard data on the economy, hasn't changed all that much. And tell me if I'm wrong on this, Justin. Hasn't changed all that much since Donald Trump won the election, since Joe Biden left office. I mean, the numbers for inflation, relatively the same. The cost of things, relatively the same. The stock market had a big dip, but it's back up. But the vibes that people are feeling are still bad. I mean, they were good for a second. Now they're bad again. They feel like they can't afford stuff. They're worried about tariffs. They're worried about coming inflation. They're worrying about the cost. I mean, obviously, they're worrying about the cost of housing, the affordability crisis. That is still there. And Donald Trump, even though he won off this idea, not doing all that much to affect it in the minds of Americans, Justin.
Katie, you do so much worrying. I worry that maybe you're not getting enough sleep, mate. Unfortunately, I don't have good news for you. You're absolutely right about everything you just said. If you look at any of the surveys, and this is not just surveys of mums and dads, it's also surveys of business leaders and executives, they're terrified about the future of the economy. You're right to contrast that with the hard data, which is to say the real numbers about what are we producing and who has a job and what's rolling off production lines, which looks pretty normal. Let me add some nuance there. It's not as strong as it was at the end of 2024. There, we were still getting some of the post-COVID slump excess catch-up and things were moving a little bit too fast, but they've moved back to a little slower, but still they're in a pretty good place. Now, let me just give you one quick reconciliation between the two. People are miserable. The data so far is not. Now, realise one of the things we're terrified about is tariffs. Most of the tariffs didn't go into effect until April. They didn't apply to goods that were already on the boats. So therefore, the next boat that leaves China for the US, it takes a month to get here, and then it takes a few months to get out of customs. And by now, we're all the way through to June. And then they finally hit the storerooms of stores that bought a lot of stuff in advance. So they haven't happened yet. And let me also point out, the thing that's terrifying, the thing that economists have come on your show, like me, to say, be worried, is that Trump would put very, very high tariffs on the world. And so far, what he's done is threatened it a lot, but not actually implemented it. And so the problem is, no, we're not seeing huge effects of huge tariffs because so far they haven't happened, although he keeps threatening them. And I do want to emphasize, if he follows through this time, I do think the effects will be very dramatic and very negative.